A few years ago, I picked up a bad habit. Whenever anybody asked me a question I didn't have an immediate answer for, like, what's your favorite cereal, I would immediately respond with one of two things, either Super Mario Sunshine or Neopets. I have no idea why this happened, but I can't help but think it's because these two things subconsciously represent my unfinished childhood business. I've already dealt with my unfinished Sunshine business, but for half my entire life, Neopets has loomed over me. Backtrack to my childhood. I'm a literal baby addicted to the hot new internet craze, Neopets. A website seamlessly combining digital pets, flash games, and MMOs, creating one of the greatest, albeit incredibly awkwardly implemented websites in history. It told the legend of the fictional land of Neopia, where all the Neopets lived their lives and went on grand adventures. Grand adventures that just so happened to take the form of terrible Kickle Cubicle clones. But then they announced you would be able to explore Neopia for the first time in history on an actual video game released for actual video game consoles. I was hyped beyond belief, but not quite hyped enough to write down the release date. Fast forward a couple years, and I realized I missed my chance. The game had come out with zero fanfare, and everybody who cared was already done with it. It was old news, so I didn't have any immediate rush to go grab it. But I still knew I would buy it and play it. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe next month. Maybe this year? As time passed, Neopets the Darkest Faerie was forgotten just a little bit more. But in August of 2017, a domino was placed. Neopets the Darkest Faerie puts us in the shoes of Tor and Roberta. Tor is a young loop who dreams of becoming a Knight of Meridell, and Roberta is the Akera niece of Brightvale's king, studying as a mage's apprentice. We start the game as Tor, beginning a trek to Meridell where he might finally be able to realize his dream. As soon as we get our sword, destroy everything in our house, and get into combat, it becomes pretty clear what kind of minimum quality standards the devs set for themselves. It is clunky as all get out. Mashing the attack button does a rapid stabbing combo, which sucks completely and is basically your punishment for button mashing. Instead, you're supposed to time your attacks for a more powerful 3-hit combo. But even if you do this, enemies will probably either move away or attack you during your combo, interrupting it even if you hit them. I figured out a trick later though. Once you get a shield, holding the shield button down while attacking confuses most enemies, constantly stunning them and preventing them from running away. I'd call it an exploit, but the combat is so wonky, I'm legitimately not certain if this was dev intended. Partway into the game, you unlock Roberta, trading in your swords and shields for wands and tomes. I was hopeful she'd be a bit less annoying to fight with since she has ranged attacks. Just point and click at your target, bang, boom, dead, done. It is not that simple. They committed one of the worst sins in action game history. They gave enemies the option not to get hit. They literally just get to decide, take damage, not take damage. I'm gonna go with the second choice. All that said, while incredibly awkward, I do have to note they did technically successfully satisfy their goal of making both Tor and Roberta equally viable combat options. Tor can hit grounded enemies more reliably, but is more likely to take damage and has trouble keeping up with moving targets. Meanwhile, Roberta is capable of hitting any potential target no matter the distance, with the trade-off of those attacks only occasionally working. And it gives the player a lot of varied options to play around with too. Right up to the final boss, I was still experimenting to figure out how in the heck I was supposed to kill anyone with this weirdo moveset, which is its own special, stupid kind of fun. Speaking of quality, I'm pretty sure I must have gotten my hands on an alpha build. The game's full of weird random presentation issues. Character animations sometimes do this super weird, super noticeable jitter. This is what children sound like during cutscenes.
Are you gonna be a knight?
And this is what children sound like during gameplay. Money usually doesn't recognize the existence of walls, falling inside, and spending an eternity unclaimed in the universe's couch cushion. And if you're a completionist like me, don't be a completionist. Most areas in the game tell you exactly how many treasures are in the immediate area and how many you found. Except that's a lie and they don't. Sometimes the counter is accurate, but sometimes the total number of treasures is outright false. Either because some chests aren't tracked by the total for no reason, skeleton, or a treasure is supposed to be tracked but isn't, leaving the area impossible to complete. The best treasure guide on the internet I could find is incomplete because the creator got so mad at the game they didn't want to bother anymore. Eventually, I just decided I'll make my best effort to find every treasure, but count completion specifically as finishing every quest in the quest list. That doesn't work either. This jerk wants you to hunt Draconac fangs, but doesn't tell you how many he wants. So I grabbed some, and he gave me a bit of cash and told me to get more. So I assumed this was just an infinitely repeatable quest and went on my way completing the game. I come back nearing the end game with like 30 fangs, and he gets mad at me for killing too many because it's bad for the environment. He steals all your fangs, refuses to take more, and the quest forever stains your save file to instill a heartfelt lesson about the dangers of abusing nature for profit. You know, it's a nice lesson, but I didn't even want the money. I just want this thing off my quest list. There's a second side quest stuck on my list for eternity too. This lady in the early game wanted me to get a skull, but I didn't find it until after a mid-game event that I think must have caused her to start spawning slightly further behind the counter. Because now, no matter how much I hug this counter, it's impossible to get within talking range, and thus impossible to tell her I finished the job. To top it off, the final area of the game gets glitched up because two main quests never bother to mark themselves as complete after you do them. It still lets you beat the game and doesn't directly prevent you from doing anything, but it's royally weird. During my adventures though, I found something that got my hopes up. A spinning wheel gambling minigame ripped straight from the Neopets website. I know it's a bit silly, but seeing and playing this stupid minigame in the heart of Meridel was an incredible experience. The world of Neopets was finally alive. I'd left this land when I was a kid, but now I'm back here living it, raking in the Neo points like never before. As I kept playing The Darkest Faerie, it became more and more clear that despite its quality standards, it wasn't just some cheap cash-in. Somebody on the dev team knew their Neopets. To become a knight, you need a parental consent form. A parental consent form is a game mechanic. This is the one and only MacGuffin that would allow you on the official website to access the Neopets forums. I'm not even sure if this was an intentional reference, but I was friggin' bawling. And the game isn't all bad either. The Darkest Faerie's biggest strength is just how big the world is and how many places the player could potentially go at a given time. It starts out really linear, but once Roberta joins the party, you're suddenly thrust in the giant land of Neopia, with a quest list that basically just says, save the world. While it's pretty obvious there's a specific order the devs expect players will probably do all the quests in, they rarely point the players directly, letting them explore relatively organically. The player would be way underpowered, but they have the option to save parts of the land the plot hasn't directly told them to go to yet, and could even end up acquiring later equipment upgrades early. An awesome reward for a momentary self-inflicted difficulty spike. I couldn't help but get a Breath of the Wild vibe out of it. Being plopped down in one giant playground of discovery, gradually freeing the lands you find, buffing your stats and equipment, and working towards facing the ultimate evil that looms at the top of your quest list throughout the whole adventure. Yes, I just compared Neopets The Darkest Faerie to Breath of the Wild. Sue me. I'm serious. Sue me. I need to be stopped. On the story front, I know this is going to be a shock to most of you, but Neopets The Darkest Faerie was not, in fact, a revolutionary tale written from the pen strokes of literary geniuses. There's no deep subtext here. Our heroes want to do nice things, and then they do nice things. Whee! That's not to say it isn't a fun ride to go on, though. Tor gets a lengthy first act dedicated to setting up his dream of becoming a knight, with some heartwarming moments and plot seeds planted early that grow out by game's end. It's just enough to make you want to see how it all turns out. And while it doesn't do anything super revolutionary on its own, it gets a ton of bonus extra credit for how they tied this game in with the Neopets website. Super endgame spoiler warning starting now. The Wimps, the Weak, and the Wusses have 5 more seconds until the greatest secrets of Neopets The Darkest Faerie are ruined for them forever. While the bulk of the game centers around Meridel, Bright Vale, and their outskirts, once you've saved those lands, you'll discover the fabled long-lost land land of Altador. Referenced a few times earlier in the game and in Neopets lore, Altador has been frozen in time for 1,000 years, but in the game's final act, you'll be tasked with exploring and unfreezing it before entering your final duel against the Darkest Faerie. With Altador freed, it once again becomes accessible by the citizens of Neopia. And by citizens of Neopia, I mean users of the Neopets website. 4 months after the game's launch, Altador was finally unfrozen and added to the Neopets map, letting website players play terrible Flash games there for the first time in 1,000 years. Not only that, the map on the website and the map in the game are faithful to each other too, which I just love way too much. I don't know why, but getting to see the same location represented faithfully in separate works of media is one of my favorite things. And if you explore Altador, there's even a little quest that acts as something of an epilogue to the Darkest Faerie. A fun way to bridge the gap between PlayStation 2 and web browser and end your Darkest Faerie adventure. My final thoughts? Neopets the Darkest Faerie is not the legend among gaming I always joked it was. In fact, it kinda sucks. But for all its technical flaws, I had a smile on my face the whole time. I give Neopets the Darkest Faerie a heartfelt 2 out of 5. Special thanks now more than ever to all Patreon backers, including Eric Flynn, Leslam, Hyperscrub ZO, RB Drock, Zalino, Mr. Harry Wonka, Mrs. Seckman, Andrew Seibert, K. Gordon, Alexander Botkin, Chris Nate, Anyu, Mason 2K, JD, Robert B. Brashier, Ross Clark, Codexo, Anorak, Ikarira, Salieri, Jez, Meta64, Zainabane, Citrus Lush, King Tom Nook, Cool Monkey 666, BCR Main Sound, Game Champ 3000 Sucks, and Retro Gamer. You peeps are totally responsible for technically forcing me to cross one of my childhood dreams off my bucket list, and I can't thank you enough. And now I begin the transition from a pre-Darkest Faerie world into a post-Darkest Faerie world. I've put absolutely no thought into what I'll do with my life now, but I think actively destroying myself is a good first step. The next Patreon goal is Bubsy. Bubsy forever. Bubsy for life. Bubsy for death. Bubsy. What could possibly go wrong?